I speak to you as we are baptized in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Please be seated. Sometimes I stand up here, or up in the pulpit across the way, or seated among the children in the family service. Sometimes when I do that, my task is to remind all of us that the culture of biblical times was so different to our present day that even though our scripture has been translated into English, we also have to translate our cultural and understanding so that the word from God will touch us in our present circumstance. Yeah, usually I have to do that. Not so much today, I don't think. Today's scripture might actually come from the New York Times. Our first reading is from Job, part of the wisdom literature of the Hebrew Bible. It teaches us that bad things happen to good people, and that people who have faith in God try to figure out why. From the beginning, we humans have wanted to know the mind of God. We have wanted wisdom. As Job's story began, I'm going to give you a little background on Job because maybe you didn't read it last night before you went to bed. Okay. I didn't, so yeah. As Job's story begins, God and Satan are having a conversation about good and evil. And Satan tries to convince God that the only reason that people believe is because God is always blessing them. God gives them rich, full lives, and so of course they believe in and worship God. And God counters that. God says people believe because we have it in us to believe and to do what is good. We are born to do good. As proof, God says to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and turns away from evil." So Satan and God disagree about human nature, and God tells Satan to go ahead. Try to get Job to turn aside from worshiping God and pursuing the good. Do whatever you want. Don't kill him, but do whatever else you want. God is convinced that Job will be faithful. And so Job is. Although he certainly does suffer at Satan's hands. His family is destroyed, his wealth is plundered, he ends up covered with boils, sitting on a dung heap. And he wants to know why. And that is where today's reading begins. The Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind. "Who is this that darkens counsel by words without knowledge? Gird up your loins like a man. I will question you, and you shall declare to me." Now, I can't be the only one in this room who reads a newspaper or scrolls social media or watches the old-fashioned network news. The world that we are living in feels like a whirlwind, an uncontrollable whirlwind. In its wake, there is death and destruction, elections, hurricanes, wars. I walked in here this morning feeling like Job on his dung heap. And God says, "Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding." In soaring poetry, the voice of God recorded in the book of Job reminds us of the intricate planning of creation, of the divine love that holds us even in the most violent of whirlwinds. We have only 14 verses of it today, but it goes on for several chapters. It is God who set our planet spinning in its course. God is the creator, redeemer, and sanctifier of our human lives. Even though it is a fable set thousands and thousands of years ago, Job doesn't need a whole lot of cultural translation. God is God, and we are not. You can sit on a dung heap if you want, but the cultural and natural storms will continue to rage, and God will not leave us alone. In our gospel portion this morning, James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came forward to Jesus and asked him for seats in glory. And it made the 10 other disciples furious. There they were, the best friends of Jesus, in the midst of the whirlwind. In their case, the whirlwind was the coming passion of Jesus. Jesus is on his way to the cross. He knows it, and he has begun to teach them that what is coming is not going to be easy. Are you able to drink the cup that I drink? And Jesus asks this question. He hasn't yet offered them the cup of Passover wine that assures them of his eternal presence with them and with us. A little bit earlier in Mark's gospel, they heard Jesus say that offering a cup of water in his name would bring an eternal reward. And now he's telling them that the cup that will be offered to him will bring death. What's coming will be so awful that it seems like the disciples are going to fly apart. Today's portion of the good news of Jesus, the good news, right? The good news. We're going to get there, I promise. The good news of Jesus. This portion needs no cultural translation either. The world is falling apart around them, and the disciples have fallen into fighting amongst themselves. Does that feel familiar? Jesus offers them, and Jesus offers us, a better way. Whoever wishes to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wishes to be first among you must be slave of all. For the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many. Last weekend, with lots of you, I celebrated the ordination to the priesthood of Emily Given, who until just last week was St. David's pastoral care associate, and Emily is now the rector of the Church of the Messiah in Gwynedd. Now, I love the pageantry and the colors and the processions and the music of the church. And on Saturday last, I even got to indulge in my delight in bells and incense. It was awesome. St. David's was well represented at the service. Organist, acolytes, thurifer, banner bearer, ribbon weaver, I didn't even know what that was, but she did great. Readers were all parishioners or staff members of St. David's, that is. I was dressed up in my church finery, and I got to sit between two wonderful colleagues whom I haven't seen in 20 years, and we were snarky with each other. It was good. Indeed, one of my favorite parts of a diocesan celebration like an ordination is the opportunity to see so many deacons and priests and even the bishop all in one place. The church hierarchy all dressed in their best and sitting in the best seats. I love you all very much, so I can tell a little story on some dear friends who were the readers who spent a half an hour before the service trying out different seats. They ended up in a really good seat. It was all good. The verger was working on them with it, right? We in the Episcopal Church like our hierarchy. You know, hierarchy is like a triangle. The people are at the base and the deacons are above them, translating the needs of the people to the church and the needs of the church to the people. And then come the priests, and we are tasked with the holy work. And finally at the top sits the bishop, holding the authority closest to God's glory. Is that it? See, all too often, that's how we church people, whatever our level, think of our hierarchy. It's a bottom-heavy triangle with increasingly less sweaty work as you get toward the point. And yet, as I wildly use my hands to describe it, I'm reminded of another triangle, Job's dung heap. It kind of makes you wonder why we like it so much. But you know, the clothes are really fine, and the seats are quite comfortable. Today's gospel shows what Jesus thinks of hierarchy. We humans care where we get to sit. We pay attention to who sits closest to the pointy end of the triangle. But following Jesus is not about sitting in the comfy seats. Following Jesus is not about grand processions and fancy clothes. It's okay. James and John are certain that they will be faithful to Jesus no matter what comes. You see, their eyes are on the comfy seats. And all this buddy-buddy with Jesus annoys the other disciples, who begin to argue. And finally, Jesus breaks in a way that reminds us of God speaking out of the whirlwind. Whoever wishes to become great amongst you must be your servant. And whoever wishes to be first among you must be slave of all. For the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many. This is the wisdom of God, that the way to greatness is through service. I wonder, in our day-to-day lives, how much we realize that each one of us can live a life of service. I have a friend who is the rector of a church in Brooklyn. Steve has been in 2 elections for bishop. He came in second both times. I am disappointed on his behalf. I'm disappointed on behalf of the whole church because I think Steve would make a great bishop. And I also think he would look good in all of those pretty robes that a bishop gets to wear. And that he would sit tall in the fancy seat that a bishop gets to sit in. But Steve is a wiser person than I am, and he has a much better view of things. After one of these elections, he posted this on Facebook. The past few months have only deepened my wonder in this mysterious vocation that for some reason I get to be a part of. I'm a Christian and a priest because it's my way. It's my way of dedicating my life to being a channel for the good. I hope to keep using the gift of the priesthood to cultivate love in a cruel world, to help drive back the evils of hatred and greed that are consuming our species, and to fight against the spiritual terror inflicted on God's children just because of who they are or where they are from. My friend understands that following Jesus gives him the opportunity to get up off the dung heap and respond to the voice in the great whirlwind. And I think that whether you are sitting pretty toward the top of a hierarchy, you know, the church isn't the only place that has hierarchies, right? If you're sitting pretty on the top of one, or whether the dung heap seems like a more apt description of your location this morning. Either way, we who follow Jesus can get up and shout into the cultural storm, I follow Jesus because it is my way of being a channel for the good. I follow Jesus to cultivate love in a cruel world. I follow Jesus to help drive back the evils of hatred and greed. I follow Jesus to fight against the spiritual terror inflicted on God's children just because of who they are or where they are from. There is good news today. And the good news is that Jesus is not talking just to bishops or priests or deacons. Jesus is talking to all of us on our own personal dung heaps, Whoever wishes to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wishes to be first among you must be slave of all. For the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many."